I'm constantly thinking about worst case scenarios. It's not healthy, but I really can't help it. A protective instinct, I suppose. And it's because I'm living in a world that continues to shock me every time I think I've seen it all. In particular, I'm alluding to the idea of just going somewhere for a wholesome, relaxing vacation and then having the absolute most terrifying situation come upon you. When I think of such a place where incidents like that are no surprise, Mexico, specifically Acapulco, instantly comes to mind. Known as the 7th deadliest place in the world, the number of kidnappings, torture, and murder cases situated in that area is astonishing and eyebrow-raising. It is so prevalent that in 2022, 3 dismembered bodies washing ashore did not prompt a shutdown of the beach itself, further accentuating the fact that these horrendous occurrences border the realm of normalcy. And just for perspective, in the span of 4 months, over 120 people were reported murdered. It was not always this way. Acapulco used to be known for its natural beauty and a destination that was frequented by tourists, including Hollywood stars such as Elvis Presley and major political figures like John F. Kennedy in the 1950s to 1960s. Physically speaking, the city was akin to paradise, resembling a dreamlike, artistic scenery of some sort. Rigid and shapely mountains, the bluest coast, and a surplus of lush greens. That subtle, innocent beauty was disrupted, though, and its popularity for tourism declined significantly in the 80s and the 90s. What happened? The narrow answer comes down to 2 things: an internal war on drug trafficking and politics. The issue was so widespread that law enforcement from other states transferred to Acapulco to tame the beast. Ironically, this took on the opposite effect, where the violence not only persisted, but increased. Urban militarization was imposed within the area, which only fed into dividing the people more. Now, that was a very broad and overly simplified explanation of a very complex issue where too many factors come into play. It's difficult to pinpoint a single root, but the involvement of drugs, politics, and violence is unquestionable. Acapulco is not the only city in Mexico that is plagued by this. Just not so long ago, I stumbled upon a recent case that occurred literally last month. Jose Gutierrez, a 36-year-old established architect based in Ohio, traveled to Mexico to visit his fiancée and soon-to-be wife, 31-year-old Daniela Marquez, along with 2 others, including Daniela's cousin, Irma Vargas, 27, and Daniela's sister, Viviana Marquez, 26. The group of 4 did not arrive at his fiancé's home by 10 p.m. as they planned. It was when Daniela's mother received a notification on her phone 2 hours later that her daughter was in Vivoras, which was 20 miles away, and this prompted alarm bells to go off. This was an accurate clue, as the vehicle that the 4 were using was found abandoned in that very city. What makes this case more frightening is the fact that multiple witnesses in the bar that the 4 were hanging out heard and even saw the group getting forced into the car and kidnapped. They described the interaction as aggressive, with lots of panic and screaming. Jose's sister called him before he went out that fateful night, and later on read their local news that something troubling occurred. Since the start of January 2023, back in the United States, family, friends, co-workers, and the community bonded together and continued to hope for their safe return. The local and national authorities in the United States were called upon to help, as well as the authorities in Mexico. Just recently, as I was preparing this video, a grisly discovery and recent establishment of this case was made. All 4 bodies were discovered in a mass grave this past Tuesday. Although their bodies were beyond recognition, forensic anthropologists identified the bodies to be theirs. Near the gravesite was Jose's vehicle, which had multiple bullet holes, as well as the dead body of another man inside the trunk of that vehicle. One might wonder, what are the chances of this horrifying incident occurring? Unfortunately, the chances are high in Mexico. So high that even the official US travel website warns about traveling to Vivoras, among other cities, citing its kidnappings and violence associated with it. This case garnered a lot of attention, I believe, because Jose was a citizen of the United States and a citizen of Mexico. He resided in Ohio and he embodied the successful, established role model who very much supported his family and who his siblings looked up to. The definition of a hard worker, it is said that Jose got his master's degree against all odds. It's just so sickening to think that something so malicious can happen right after a moment that was so wholesome, so lively, and so bright. Just thinking of it, the four of them had so much going for them, and for all of that to just be taken away in a split moment, so unexpectedly, so nonsensically, is honestly so mind-boggling. This life, this world, it never ceases to surprise me. It just goes to show we really don't know how long we have on this earth when things like this can just happen out of nowhere. The news of their deaths has created a living nightmare for the families, and one member wrote on their Facebook, "I may not have been prepared for many things, but this is the one I was least prepared for. Shine cousins, fly high." Kidnapping in general is scary and oftentimes leads to endangerment, but being kidnapped in an entirely different country is a nightmare on a whole new level. Speaking of kidnappings, back in 2013 in the city of Guerrero, 3 men were arrested by the federal authorities for being linked to over 200 murders of kidnapped victims, drug dealers, and rival gang members. These 3 men were Felipe Garcia, 30, Jose Lopez Alcaraz, 43, and Froilan Barrera Morales, 40. Just in that month alone, a whopping 64 bodies were found in mass graves. 5 of 8 family members' bodies were discovered in trash bags just on the highway. They were kidnapped and there were signs of torture used on them. Although their bodies were dismembered to pieces, they were able to be identified. These specific family victims were between 18 to 40 years old. The whereabouts of the 3 other family members that were also kidnapped are unknown to this day. One of them included an 8-year-old girl. There are numerous reasons why people are targeted, and some people do survive to tell. Migrants and travelers at the border especially are vulnerable when kidnappers in the form of gangs hold them in captivity. They force the victims to call their families and demand money. On average, these criminals can make between $600 and $20,000 per capture. The perpetrators go about this in a systematic and calculative way. It's been reported that these criminals are on a constant lookout, watching and listening to people's conversations carefully. One incident involved a survivor named Jorge Perez, who recalled that these criminals can be disguised as anything, even taxi drivers. When he arrived at the bus station and entered what looked like a taxi, he didn't think much of it until he realized that the driver was listening to his conversation quite intently. The driver quickly gathered that he was Venezuelan and that he was going to the United States as a refugee. He told Jorge that he was going to snitch on him basically to the gang members so that they could kidnap him. In hindsight, this was a fear tactic to retrieve a whopping $600 from Jorge, as the driver did not let him exit the taxi without getting the money. The hotel he then dropped him off was also very shady and terrifying. He did not sleep at all due to the constant yelling and door slamming. After 2 months, Jorge would finally make it to the United States, alive. Miraculously, he dodged what could have unfolded as something quite sinister and even deadly. Migrants and tourists alike are subjected to crime in Mexico. I even made a video in the past about the brutal sacrifice of an American student, Mark Kilroy, in 1989 when he was vacationing at Tamaulipas, Mexico during spring break. You can check out that video linked below. It was horrific. Mexico was always a place I wanted to travel to. Its natural beauty, ancient history, and vibrant culture really stand out to me. To this day, however, it is listed as one of the most dangerous countries to travel to, according to government data released earlier this month. Over 600 kidnappings were reported from January to November 2022 in Mexico, and that is a slight increase from the data in 2021. I would say even going in groups does not keep one safe, as the group of 4 we discussed earlier were all kidnapped in one go in what appeared to be a very much crowded and lively night. Have you ever experienced anything shady traveling to another country? Comment below, as I would be very interested in reading about that. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for more interesting videos.